Hey guys, so the Netflix event of all of us nerds have been waiting for and all Marvel fans have been waiting for, The Defenders, has finally been released. Now, if you don't know, The Defenders is essentially the culmination of Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist all coming together to defend New York from this ancient evil, well, not necessarily ancient evil, but this evil group called the Hand. Let me start off by first saying that this series was actually really great. I highly recommend it. It was totally worth it, especially if you have watched all four of the previous series with Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. I know Iron Fist came under a bit of scrutiny as compared to the other three, but this was absolutely phenomenal. It was actually one of the greatest sort of television events, I think, well, I guess television streaming events that I really looked forward to. And it finally came out, and it really did pay off. It had that very much feeling of when the Avengers finally assembled for the first time in the Avengers. It had that same feeling when all these four vigilantes finally get together to defend New York from this evil, and it just really paid off, especially if you watched all four of the series. If you're new to any of it, it might seem a little bit off and a little bit different, but at the same time, if you've watched those previous series, it makes it completely worth it and totally worth watching. The first thing I want to talk about is the acting. The acting is actually really well done. Charlie Cox nails it as Daredevil once again. He has done phenomenal for the past two seasons on Daredevil, and I'm really looking forward to him continuing that part. Kristen Ritter does pretty good as Jessica Jones, and that sort of snarky, smart-ass woman it's kind of nice to see that character. There were a couple of times where I felt like she should have been more involved, though, which I was a little bit disappointed in. Mike Coulter does great as Luke Cage, as well as Finn Jones doing great as Iron Fist. Again, I know Iron Fist came under quite a bit of scrutiny when it was released, and it wasn't as well received as the other three. However, in The Defenders, Finn Jones' character of Iron Fist becomes a lot more integral to the story, as well as he shines a lot more. There's a lot more of the Danny Rand character of the comics that we know and love that is very much in this series. He's a lot more lighthearted. He cracks a few jokes. He seems not as uptight as he was in his own first season, and I think that's kind of what they're going to go for from now on. They sort of realized this isn't the Danny Rand that people really want to see, I guess, so they sort of made him a little bit more lighthearted, and now I think that's going to continue for the future Iron Fist series, which will make it a lot more entertaining in the future. Also in the series was Sigourney Weaver as the main villain of the series. She does pretty well as always. I mean, she's done it for so many years. She's a pro, hands down. Like, she does everything phenomenally. She really plays this sort of evil character really well. This isn't really a spoiler, but Elektra is back. This isn't a spoiler because it's essentially in the trailers, so I mean, big surprise there. But Elektra is back, and I really wasn't a fan of Elektra. Just the character in general, I'm not a big fan of the character. I thought she was okay in Daredevil Season 2, but then she comes back in this season. I didn't find her quite as annoying in this season. She has a lot of great fights. She has some things going on. I don't want to spoil it too much for you in case you haven't seen it yet. But I feel like I could more tolerate her in this series than when she was all crazy and stuff in the Daredevil Season 2. I just felt like she was much better placed as a sort of lower secondary character, I guess, as opposed to where she was in Daredevil Season 2. And I guess since I'm on the subject of acting, I think I might as well say something that I feel like is one of the faults of the show. And that was, I feel like they tried to cram too much into 8 episodes. They tried to take essentially 4 series and cram side stories in them into all the side stories from all 4 series into this one Defender series, so it feels like it's all interconnected. That felt like it was a little bit too much sometimes. Like, for instance, there were a couple scenes with Foggy and I forget her name. The other lawyer that they sort of took on under their wing, who's now a reporter. The redheaded girl, I apologize, I completely blank on her name right now. I'll probably remember it later. But like, their side stories kind of come in a little bit. There's some side stories with Misty Knight and like the Rosario Dawson's character of the nurse. There's a couple of various side stories that just feel like they're sort of like, meh, like I could totally do without them. And I feel like it was kind of a waste, especially since we want to be so focused on these 4 vigilantes that are coming together for the first time, and that's super exciting. And the fact that, like, when we sort of detract from that, it's just sort of like not as interesting, and I wish we sort of focused on the 4 characters and they're coming together to really grow as a team. And we got that, don't get me wrong, but I just felt like when it detracted from that, the story just sort of faltered a little bit. Now, as for the overall story, I thought it was actually really, really good. I liked how all four characters felt like they came together very organically. I felt like that was something that they weren't forced, that they were like, oh, we should be a super team. I mean, Iron Fist does kind of suggest that at one point, but they don't really come together and like all hands in and like all throw their hands up in the air and there's a freeze frame moment. There wasn't any of that. This one, they actually felt like they had problems and they didn't even really want to work together, but they knew they had to work together in order to stop the Hand from essentially destroying New York or whatever it is that they're up to, that they have to figure out. So they very much came together in a way that felt unique and it wasn't forced, which was very much appreciated. But overall story, I felt like was pretty good. I liked how they kept a lot of the mystery as to what the Hand was up to, because the Hand is a very mysterious group. So that was very nice, especially since they sort of foreshadowed some of that sneakiness and that deceptiveness that the Hand has in previous series. So that felt really good. But that kind of leads to a weakness, in my opinion, is that what the Hand is actually up to ends up being not as exciting as what the build up to it was, and all this what all the secrets were leading to. It didn't feel as impactful, and that was kind of disappointing. I wish if there was a little bit bigger reason why the Hand was doing what they were doing, that would have made it a lot more impactful and probably shot this series into the sky for me as far as how great of a quality it was. Don't get me wrong, it's fantastic, but that did falter it to a point where I was like, well, that kind of just fell flat, and now I kind of don't really care as much anymore once you find out what the Hand is after. It's just kind of disappointing, and I felt like that I was just kind of like, that's all they were after. That's kind of sad. There really wasn't a whole lot for me to be excited about for that. That was kind of disappointing, but everything else was absolutely fantastic. And one of the biggest strengths, hands down, of this series was the actual stunt work and the fighting scenes. There's actually quite a couple. One of my favorites, hands down, though, was like when I almost called them the Avengers. The Defenders get together essentially for the first time and fight in like this office building and like hallway scene. Marvel and Netflix do really well with like fighting in hallway scenes for some reason. I don't know what it is. But we really get a sense of how they work together as a team. There's a couple of comebacks and sort of like interaction between the four during this moment that's actually kind of funny. But I felt like that was probably one of the best fighting scenes just because it felt so organic how they came together and sort of started fighting and backing each other up, but they also sort of knew each other, but sort of not. It's really kind of an interesting scene, and I think that was probably one of my favorites of the series. But as far as fight scenes and stunt work goes, absolutely fantastic. Daredevil scenes were awesome as his fight scenes. Jessica Jones has a little bit. Iron Fist probably has the most fight scenes, I would say. He was more of the main star, I guess. Not necessarily star, but he was the main focus of the entire series. And he did get some of the better fights, but all the fight and stunt coordination were absolutely fantastic. I just wish there might have been a few more, actually, because they were so well done. I felt like it was just really something that you really wanted to see, and it was so fantastic to watch it on screen. Another really big strength that I had for the Defenders was actually the cinematography. A lot of the way that the series is shot is very reminiscent of a comic book style. There's a lot of sort of cocky angles, sort of side angles, various shots that look very much like they're ripped straight out of a comic book. And it was actually really cool to see that. Sometimes it was a little bit off-putting just because you're like, okay, just fix it and, we can sort of move on. But again, it did have that style of a comic book, so you were really drawn into it as you are with a comic book. The only thing that we're missing were like those side panels, and that was about it. But speaking of like the overall cinematography, one of the great things in like the first 2 episodes, right before the Defenders actually get together, the showrunners did something very clever, in my opinion. So each character has more or less a color that they're assigned. Well, not necessarily assigned, but Daredevil has red, Jessica Jones has purple, Luke Cage has yellow, and Iron Fist has green. And a lot of their individual scenes, but again, before they come together as a team, as the Defenders, they sort of have this filter or sort of color scheme with each frame that their character is sort of in with that color. And I thought that was pretty clever, and I really liked the way that was shot. I kind of wish they would have continued that a little bit further down the road, but I think it probably would have become a little bit of annoying once the characters are together and you see red, then yellow, then purple, then green, then back to red, then back to yellow, then back to purple, based on whoever's talking or whatever may be going on. So I completely understand why they didn't keep it going, but it was kind of cool to see in the first few episodes, and that was probably one of my favorite things visually that the show had to offer. It was just like kind of a cool little comic book thing that they did, and it was just kind of cool to watch. Essentially, I really did like the Defenders. They had a lot of great things to offer, had a lot of great fights, a lot of great stunt coordination, cinematography was great, the acting was really good, story kind of faltered here and there, but overall I think it was pretty good. And actually, this was essentially the culmination of the past 2 years of Marvel and Netflix working together over these 4 series and to create essentially what is the MCU, I guess, phase 1 on television versus in the theaters. This was essentially the bookend of what I would call phase 1 for what Marvel has created with Daredevil seasons 1 and 2, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist season 1s. It was like the perfect sort of bookend, bringing them all together, how they're going to go on from here and go on to phase 2 with their sort of season 2s, or essentially with Daredevil season 3. It's going to be really interesting, especially since now Punisher is going to be incorporated with that, and I don't really know what else, but I'm really looking forward to how Marvel and Netflix sort of pair together and work together to create and build these worlds even further, and that has me super excited. And The Defenders was the perfect culmination, as I said. So then for that reason, the grade I'm going to give The Defenders is an A. So guys, those are my thoughts and opinions on The Defenders. It's now streaming on Netflix. It's, again, about 8 episodes. Each are about an hour, close to an hour and a half on the last one. But they're all really, really good, and I highly recommend watching them. So if you have seen it, be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, as well as leave a like if you feel so inclined. And hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I have some other videos that I have coming up, and I'm shooting right after this one. So be sure to you're subscribed so you can see those videos. But other than that, that's all I have for right now for The Defenders, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.